Hi friends, I am Uday Kandpal and I welcome you all to yet another lecture on NCERT Class 8 History Chapter 9 with Fact Elaboration. Notes by Uday Kandpal. The name of the chapter is Women, Caste and Reform. So we will talk about the various caste reform movements and the feminism. So first thing is Sati system. 200 years ago, things were very different. Most children were married off at an early age. Both Hindu and Muslim men could marry more than one wife. In some parts of the country, widows were praised if they chose the death by burning themselves on the funeral pyres of their husband. Women who die in this manner, whether willingly or otherwise, were called as sati, meaning virtuous women. Women's rights to property were also restricted. Besides, most women had virtually no access to education. In many parts of the country, people believed that if a woman was educated, she would become a widow. Differences between the men and women were not the only ones in the society. In most regions, people were divided along the lines of caste. Brahmins and Kshatriyas considered themselves as upper caste. Others, such as traders and moneylenders, often referred to as Vaishyas, were placed after them. Then came peasants and artisans such as weavers and potters, referred to as Shudras. At the lowest rung at these labored to keep cities and villages clean and worked at jobs that upper caste considered polluting. That is, it could lead to the loss of caste status. The upper caste also many of these groups at the bottom as untouchable. They were not allowed to enter temples, draw water from the wells used by the upper caste, or bathe in the ponds where the upper caste bathed. They were seen as inferior human beings. Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, 22nd May to 1772 to 27 September 1833, was one of the founders of Brahmo Samaj, the precursor of the Brahmo Samaj, a social religious reform movement in the Indian subcontinent. He was given the title of Raja by Akbar II, the Mughal emperor. His influence was apparent in the field of politics, public administration, education, and religion. He was known for his efforts to abolish the practices of sati and child marriage. Raja Ram Mohan Roy is considered to be the father of Bengal and is so by many historians. Raja Ram Mohan Roy's impact on modern history was a revival of his pure ethical principles of Vedanta school of philosophy as found in the Upanishads. He preached the unity of God, made early translations of Vedic scriptures into English, co-founded the Calcutta Unitarian Society, and founded the Brahmo Samaj. The Brahmo Samaj played a major role in the reforming and the modernizing the Indian society. He successfully campaigned against sati, the practicing of burning widows. He sought to integrate the Western culture with the best features of the own country traditions. He established a number of people to schools to popularize the modern system, effectively replacing Sanskrit-based education with the English-based education system in India. He promoted a rational, ethical, non-authoritarian, this worldly and social reform Hinduism. His writings also sparked interest among British and American Unitarians. Raja Ram Mohan Roy reforms. So we'll talk about the three types of reforms: the religious reforms, the social reforms, the educationalist reforms. So religious reforms of Roy contained in some beliefs of Brahmo Samaj expounded by Raja Narayan Basu. Brahmo Samaj believed that the most fundamental doctrines of Brahmanism are the basis of the religion followed by men. Brahmo Samaj believes in the existence of one supreme God, a God endowed with a distinct personality and moral attributes equal to his nature and intelligence, befitting the author and preserver of the universe, and worship him alone. Brahmo Samaj believe that the worship of him needs no fixed place or time. We can adore him at any time and any place, provided that time, that place are calculated to compose and direct the mind towards him. Social reforms. Rev. Roy found the Atma Sabha and the Unitarian community to fight the social evils and to propagate the social and educationalist reforms. He was the man who fought against superstitions, a pioneer in the Indian education and a trendsetter in Bengali prose and the Indian press. Crusaded against Hindu customs such as sati, polygamy, child marriage, and the caste system. Demanded property inheritance for rights for women, and into 1828 he set up the Brahmo Sabha, a movement of reformist Bengali Brahmins to fight against the social evils. Educationalist reforms. Roy believed education to be an implementation for the social reform. In 1817, in collaboration with David Hare, he set up the Hindu College at Calcutta. In 1822, Roy founded the Anglo-Hindu school, followed 4 years later, 1826, by Vedant College, where he insisted that his teachings of monotheistic doctrines be incorporated with modern Western curriculum. In 1830, he helped Alexander Duff in establishing the General Assembly's institution now known as the Scottish Church College by providing him with the venue vacated by Brahmo Sabha and getting the first batch of students. He supported the induction of Western learning into the Indian education. He also set up the Vedant College offering courses as a synthesis for Western and Indian learning. His most popular journal was the Sambat Kaumudi. He covered topics like freedom of the press, induction of Indians into the higher ranks of service and separations of the executive and judiciary. Uh, when English company merged the press, Raj Mohan composed two memorials against this in 1829 and 1830 respectively. Brahmo Samaj is the societal component of Brahmanism which believed as monotheistic reformist movement of the Hindu religion that appeared during the Bengal Renaissance. It practiced today mainly as Adi Dharm after its eclipse in the Bengal consequent to the exit of Tattvabodhini Sabha from its rank in 1839. After publication of Hemendranath Tagore's Brahmo Anushthan Code of Practice in 1860, which formally divorced Brahmoism from the Hinduism, the first Brahmo Samaj was founded in 1861 at Lahore by Pandit Navin Chandra Roy. Doctrine of Brahmo Samaj. The following doctrines, as noted in Renaissance of the Hinduism, are commonly to all varieties and offshoots of the Brahmo Samaj. Brahmo Samajists have no faith in any scripture as an authority. Brahmo Samajists have no faith in avatars. Brahmo Samajists denounce polytheism and idol worship. Brahmo Samajists are against caste restrictions. Brahmo Samajists make faith in the doctrines of karma and rebirth optional. Working towards change. From the early 19th century, we find debates and discussions about the social customs and practices taking on a new character. One important reason for this was the development of new reform of communication. For the first time, books, newspapers, magazines, leaflets, and pamphlets were printed. They were far cheaper and far more accessible than the manuscript that you have read about. Therefore, ordinary people could read these, and many of them could write and express their ideas in their own languages. All kind of issues, social, political, economic, and religious, could now be debated and discussed by men, and sometimes by women as well, in the new cities. The discussion could reach out to a wider public and could become linked to the movements for social change. These debates were often initiated by the Indian reformers and reform groups. One such reformer was Raja Ram Mohan Roy, 1772 to 1833. He founded a reform association known as the Brahmo Sabha, later known as the Brahmo Samaj in Calcutta. People such as Raja Ram Mohan Roy were described as reformers because they felt that the changes were necessary in the society and unjust practices needed to be done away with. They thought that the best way to ensure each such change was persuading people to give up the old practices and adopt a new way of life. Changing the lives of widows. Ram Mohan Roy was particularly moved by the problems widows faced in their lives. He began a campaign against the practice of sati. Ram Mohan Roy was well versed in the Sanskrit, Persian, and several other Indian and European languages. He tried to show through his writings that the practice of widow burning had no sanction in the ancient text. By the early 19th century, many British officials had also begun to criticize Indian traditions and customs. They were therefore more than willing to listen to Ram Mohan, who was reputed to be a learned man. In 1829, sati was banned. The strategy adopted by Ram Mohan was used by later reformers as well. Wherever they wished to challenge a particular practice that seemed harmful, they tried to find a verse of sentence in the ancient sacred texts that supported their point of view. They then suggested that the practice as it existed at present was against the early tradition. For instance, one of the famous reformers, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, used the ancient text to suggest the widow could remarry. His suggestion was adopted by British officials and was a law passed in 1856 permitting widow remarriage. Those who were against the remarriage of widows opposed Vidyasagar and even boycotted him. By the second half of the 19th century, the movement in the favor of widow remarriage spread to the other parts of the country. In the Telugu-speaking areas of the Madras Presidency, Veer Salingam Pantulu formed an association for widow remarriage. Around the same time, young intellectuals and reformers in the Bombay pledged themselves to working for the same cause. In the north, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, who founded a reform association called the Arya Samaj, also supported widow remarriage. Vidyasagar in Calcutta and many other reformers in Bombay set up schools for girls. When the first schools were opened in the mid-19th century, many people were afraid of them. They feared that the schools would take girls away from home, prevent them from doing their domestic duties. Moreover, the girls had to travel through public places in order to reach school. Many people were felt that this would have a corrupting influence on them. They also felt that girls should stay away from public spaces. Therefore, throughout the 19th century, most educated women were taught at home by the liberal fathers or husbands. Sometimes women taught themselves. Do you remember what you read about the Raj Sundari Devi in book Social and Political Life in class 7? She was one of those who secretly learned to read and write in the flickering light of candles at night. Vidyasagar in Calcutta and some many other reformers in Bombay set up the school for girls. When the first schools were opened in the mid 19th century, many people were afraid of them. They feared that the schools would take girls away from home, prevent them from doing their domestic duties. Moreover, the girls had to travel through the public places in order to reach school. Many people felt that this would have a corrupting influence on them. They felt all the girls should stay away from the public spaces. Therefore, throughout the 19th century, most educated women were taught at home by the liberal fathers or husbands. Sometimes women taught themselves. Do you remember what you read about the Raj Sundari Devi in the book? So she was one of those who secretly learned to read and write in the flickering light of candles at night in latter part of the century. Schools for girls were established by Arya Samaj in Punjab and Jyotirao Phule in Maharashtra. By 1880s, the Indian women began to enter universities. Some of them trained to be doctors, some became teachers. Many women began to write and publish their critical views on the place of women in society. Tarabai Shinde, a woman educated at the home at Pune, published a book, Stri Purush Tulna, a comparison between the women and men, criticizing the social differences between men and women. Changing the lives of widows continued. Pandit Ramabai, a great scholar of Sanskrit, felt that Hinduism was oppressive towards women and wrote a book about the miserable lives of upper caste Hindu women. She founded a widows at home at Pune to provide shelter to the widows who had been treated badly by their husbands' relatives. Here, women were trained so that they could support themselves economically. In the 20th century, leaders such as Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose lent their support to the demands for greater equality and freedom for women. Dayanand Saraswati. Wow. Dayanand Saraswati, 12 February 1824, 30 October 1883, was an Indian philosopher, social leader, and founder of the Arya Samaj, a reform movement of the Vedic Dharma. He was the first to give the call for Swaraj as India for Indians in 1876, a call later given up by Lokmanya Tilak. Denouncing the idolatry and ritual worship, he worked towards reviving Vedic Indology. Subsequently, the philosopher and the President of India, S. Radhakrishnan, called him one of the makers of modern India, as did Sri Aurobindo. Those who were influenced by and followed by Dayanand included Madam Kama, Pandit Lekhram, Swami Shraddhanand, Swamiji Shyamji Krishna Verma, Kishan Singh, Bhagat Singh, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, Bhai Parmanand, Lala Hardayal, Madan Lal Dhingra, Ram Prasad Bismil, Mahadev Govind Ranade, Ashfaqullah Khan, Mahatma Hansraj, Lala Rajpat Rai, Yogmaya Newpade. He was a sannyasi from the boyhood and a scholar. He believed in the infallible authority of the Vedas. Dayanand advocated the doctrine of karma and the reincarnation. He emphasized the Vedic ideals of brahmacharya, including celibacy and devotion to God. Among Dayanand's contributions were the promoting of the equal rights for women, such as the right for education and reading of Indian scriptures and the commentary on the Vedas from the Vedic Sanskrit in the Sanskrit as well as Hindi. Now we'll talk about Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, born 26 September 1822, 29 July 1891 as Ishwar Chandra Bandyopadhyay was an Indian educator and social reformer. His efforts to simplify and modernize Bengali prose were significant. He also rationalized and simplified the Bengali alphabet and type, which had remained unchanged since Charles Wilkins and Panchanand Karmakar had cut the first word Bengali type in 1780s. He is considered the father of Bengali prose. He was the most prominent campaigner for Hindu remarriage and petitioned legislative councils despite several opposition and counter-petition against the proposal with nearly four times more signatures by Radhakant Dev and Dharma Sabha. But Lord Dalhousie personally finalized the bill despite the opposition, as with it considered a flagrant breach of the Hindu customs as prevalent then the Hindu Widows Remarriage Act 1856 was passed. He received the title Vidyasagar, which means knowledge, and Sagar means ocean, ocean of knowledge, from Sanskrit College, Calcutta, from where he graduated for his excellent performance in Sanskrit studies and philosophy. Note the Cambridge mathematicians Anil Kumar Gain founded Vidyasagar University named in his honor. Feminism. Feminism is a range of social movements, political movements, and ideologies that aim to refine Feminism in range of social movements, political movements, and ideologies that aim to define and establish the political, economical, personal, and social equalities of the sexes. Feminism incorporates the position that societies prioritize the male point of view and and that the women are treated unjustly within these societies. Efforts to change that include fighting against gender stereotypes and establishing educational, professional, and interpersonal opportunities, outcomes for women, and that are equal to those of men. Feminist movements have campaigned and continue to campaign for the women's rights, including the right to vote, hold public office, work, earn equal pay, own property, receive education, enter contracts, and have equal rights within marriage and maternity leave. Feminists have also worked to ensure access to legal abortions and social integrations and to protect women and girls from rape, sexual harassment, and domestic violence. Change in female dress standards and acceptable physical activities for females have been a part of feminist movements. Feminist theory is an extension of feminism into theoretical and philosophical fields. It encompasses work in a variety of disciplines including anthropology, sociology, economics, women's studies, literary criticism, art, history, psychoanalysis, and philosophy. Feminist theory aims to understand gender inequality and focuses on gender politics, power relations, and sexuality, with the providing a critique for the social and political relations. Much of the feminist theory also focuses on promotion of women's rights and interests. Themes explored in the feminist theory include discrimination, stereotyping, objectification, especially sexual objectification, oppression, and patriarchy. In the field of literary criticism, Eileen Showalter describes the development of feminist theory as having three phases. The first she calls as feminist critique, in which the feminist reader examines the ideologies behind the literary phenomena. The second, Showalter calls genocriticism, in which the woman is producer of the textual meaning. The last phase she calls as gender theory, in which the ideological inscription and literary effects of the sex gender are explored. The Satnami movement in the central India was founded by the Khasidas, who worked among the leather workers and organized a movement to improve their social status. In eastern Bengal, Haridas Thakur's Matua sect worked among the Chandal cultivators. Haridas questioned Brahmanical texts that supported the caste system. In what present-day Kerala, a guru from the Isava caste, Sri Narayana Guru, proclaimed the ideals of unity for his pupil. He argued against treating people unequally on the basis of caste differences. According to him, all humankind belonged to the same caste. One of his famous sentiments was Oru Zati, Oru Matam, Oru Devam Manushanu. One caste, one religion, one God for humankind. Gulamgiri. One of the most vocal among the low caste leaders of the was Jyotirao Phule. Born in 1827, he studied in schools set up by Christian missionaries. On growing up, he developed his own ideas about the injustices of the caste society. He set out to attack the Brahmins, claimed that he was superior to others since they were Aryans. Phule argued that Aryans were foreigners who came outside the subcontinent and defeated and subjugated the true children of the country, those who had lived here from before the coming of the Aryans. As the Aryans established their dominance, they began looking for defeated population as inferior, as low caste people. According to Phule, the upper caste had no right on their land and power. In reality, the land belonged to indigenous people and the so-called low caste. Ambedkar was born into a Mahar family. As a child, he experienced what caste prejudice meant in the everyday life. In a school, he was forced to sit outside the classroom on the ground and was not allowed to drink water from the taps that upper caste children used. After finishing school, he got a fellowship to go to the US for higher studies. On his return to India in 1919, he wrote extensively about upper caste power in the contemporary society. In 1927, Ambedkar started a temple entry movement in which the Mahar caste followers participated, and Brahman priests were outraged when the Dalits used water from the temple tank. Ambedkar had led three such movements for the temple entry between 1927 and 1935. His aim was to make everyone see the power of caste prejudice within the society. The non-Brahman movement. In the early 20th century, the non-Brahman movement started. The initiative came from the non-Brahman castes that have acquired access to education, wealth, and influence. They argued that Brahmins were the heirs of Aryan invaders from the north and who had conquered southern lands of the original inhabitants of the region. The indigenous Dravidian races, they also challenged the Brahmanical claims to power. E.V. Ramasamy Naikar, or Periyar as he was called, came from a low middle class family. Interestingly, he had been an ascetic in his early life and had studied Sanskrit scriptures carefully. Later, he became a member of the Congress, only to leave it in disgust when he found that the feast, organized by nationalist seating arrangements followed by caste distinctions, that is, the lower caste that were made to sit at a distance from the upper caste, convinced that the untouchables had to fight for their dignity, Periyar founded the self-respect movement. He argued that the untouchables were the true upholders of an original Tamil and Dravidian culture which had been subjugated by Brahmins. He felt that all religious authorities saw social divisions and inequality as God-given. Untouchables had to free themselves, therefore, all religions in order to achieve social equality. Periyar was an outspoken critique of Hindu scriptures, especially of the codes of Manu, the ancient lawgiver, and the Bhagavad Gita and the Ramayana. He said that these texts had been used to establish the authority of Brahmins over the lower caste and the domination of men over women. These assertions did not go unchallenged. The forceful speeches, writings, and monuments of the lower caste leaders did to rethinking and some self-criticism among the upper caste nationalist leaders. But Orthodox Hindu society also reacted by founding Sanatan Dharma Sabhas and the Bharat Dharma Mahamandal in the north and the assassination like the Brahman Sabha in Bengal. The object of this association was to uphold the caste distinctions as a cornerstone of the Hinduism and show how this was sanctified by scriptures. Debates and struggles over the caste continued beyond the colonial period and are still going in our own times. The Brahmo Samaj. Brahmo Samaj, formed in 1830, prohibited all the forms of idolatry and sacrifice, believed in the Upanishads, and forbade its members from criticizing other religious practices. It critically drew upon the ideas of religion, especially of Hinduism and Christianity, looking at their negative positive dimensions. The Derozio and the Young Bengal. Henry Louis Vivant Derozio, a teacher at the Hindu College, Calcutta in the 1820s, promoted radical ideas and encouraged his pupils to question all authorities. Referred to as Young Bengal movement, his students attacked tradition and custom, demanded education for women, and campaigned for the freedom of thought and expression. The Ramakrishna Mission for and Vivekanand, named after Ramakrishna Paramhansa Swami Vivekanand's guru, the Ramakrishna Mission stressed the ideal of salvation through social service and selfless action. The Prarthana Samaj, established in 1867 at Bombay, the Prarthana Samaj sought to remove the caste restrictions, abolish the child marriage, encourage the education of women, and end the ban on the widow remarriage. Its religious meetings drew upon the Hindu and Buddhist and Christian texts. The VIII Samaj, established in Madras in 1864, the VIII Samaj was inspired by the Brahmo Samaj. It worked to abolish the caste distinction and promote widow remarriage and women's education. Its members believed in one God. They condemned the superstitions and rituals of Orthodox Hinduism. The Aligarh movement, the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College founded by the Sayyid Ahmad Khan in 1875 at Aligarh later became the Aligarh Muslim University. The institution offered modern education, including the Western science, to Muslims. The Aligarh movement, as it was known, had an enormous impact in the area of educational reforms. The Singh Sabha movement reformed organizations of the Sikhs. The first Singh Sabha were formed at Amritsar in 1873 and at Lahore in 1879. The Sabhas sought to rid Sikhism of superstitious caste distinctions and practices seen by them as non-Sikh. They promoted education among the Sikh, often combining modern instructions with Sikh teachings. So thank you for watching my lecture. Hope you learned a lot for your competitive exam as well. Have a nice day. Bye bye.